welcome to the Waking Hour Webcast, today with Hayley Ebersole, hosted by Victoria Hunt.
So today I have Hayley from Body Mind Freedom. She's a beloved yoga teacher at Namaste Yoga in the East Bay and one of our resident instructors for the Waking Hour. Do you want to talk a little bit about Body Mind Freedom and how you got started in yoga?
I suffered from eating disorders from the time I was as young as I can remember. I remember being 6 or 7, and I had a lot of modeling, placed an extreme emphasis on how one's body looked. So I remember using food in an unhealthy way from the time I was really young, and meanwhile also being really groomed for this kind of high achieving perfection. I grabbed right onto that goal and just kind of ran with it through college. So between being on the outside a really high achieving, successful kid, playing a lot of sports and being the president of my class again and again, and things like that I was just reacting to this cultural idea that if we do more and we accomplish more, then we're valued and we're worthy. And then inside, I was always had this secret world of suffering and inadequacy and self-destruction. So when I found yoga, which was really kind of late in high school, and started to invest more in it in college, it was there was something that I was seeking to accomplish, or I really wanted to execute that perfect pose. And then I also wanted the fitness benefits, which were being touted at the time as get this lean body. And over time, as I started committing more and more to my yoga practice, I just noticed that my intentions were shifting significantly, and I was deepening into this relationship with really my own shadow, these dark parts of myself that were always pushing me to be more, as if I wasn't good enough already. So I was coming face to face with that part of myself. The yoga awakened within me an awareness of that part of myself that I had previously just kind of bought into, that this is just who I am. This is just the way it is in the world. And as I became more and more aware of that shadow part of myself, the power of yoga is that as we become more aware of those parts of ourselves that are challenging and uncomfortable, there's simultaneously with the awareness this kind of awakening of compassion, this awakening of kindness. And the yoga has been really the root of my healing and awakening. Love that first question, because it really speaks so much to where we're at right now. Because I've been as I'm sitting with what I'm seeing around me, I see we're really there. That individual process that we find as yogis is now being magnified on a collective level, that we're really in this collective shadow work, or this collective rite of passage together, where we're seeing those parts of ourselves that are really misaligned and are not serving us in seeing and knowing our true nature as enough, our true nature as connected to the wholeness. And that idea of individualism and performance and success at the expense of the health of nature and the health of our own bodies, the health of our communities and our children, the health of third world peoples, the health of the less privileged in our own country, the health of indigenous people of the land. We're seeing all of these things kind of boil up to the surface. And that's the power of the yoga practice, is it kind of brings up the challenge so that we can look at it. But fortunately, it also gives us tools to manage that challenge and to navigate the dark night of the soul, to navigate the underworld. It's a long answer to a short question, but that's really what Body Mind Freedom is about. It's about using the body to awaken to our fullest potential in this lifetime, which requires that we feel, requires we don't numb out, and requires that we find the truth within us of what is our offering, what is our pose, what is our work in this world, how are we part of the wholeness of on our planet versus how can we look a certain way or act a certain way or achieve a certain amount of success. Body mind freedom is about liberating those ideas, opening and expanding the mind to include and to really move from the center of our own heart.
Thank you for sharing your journey, how you got there as well, and your stories, because I think that's very, like, I think a lot of people have dealt with needing to achieve, and thank you for sharing your experience. And this perfectly goes into it. Right now, under COVID-19, a pandemic, people are stressing, people are getting so anxious. How are you continuing to deal with that? How is your transitioning to being online classes and having to cancel events? And if you recommend resources to others.
Thank you for that question. First, I just want to acknowledge that it is a really, really tender time for all of us. And part of that tenderness, or part of really the underworld journey, this part of this rite of passage and this process of awakening or really birthing, is it's not always easy to enter into a new phase. It's not always easy in transition. And in fact, that's part of the energy of transition, is the challenge, the mind and the ego self knowing exactly what to expect. We get thrown off balance, and all the things that get pushed down come to the surface. So I want to acknowledge that there's so much emotion, there's so much challenging emotion present for all of us. And for me as well, I've gone through all kinds of different phases, especially at the beginning. I went through all kinds of different phases of crazy, and really kind of, fortunately, I feel so blessed. And those of us who have been practicing yoga or the qigong, those of us who have been in our meditation practice, we're really well equipped to be leaders right now, because part of that work is the shadow work, is that we know that it's hard to come back to our practice. That's part of practice, is that it requires moving through when you don't want to do it. So being with that tenderness, now what can we do about that? I think the number one thing is to actually feel. There are some of us who have more space, those of us who are now unemployed or who are working less. We have actually a bigger responsibility, because there's a processing that is needing to happen for all of us at this time, when the collective grit is coming to the surface and we're seeing the destruction laid really bare. The most vulnerable in society being more at risk in this situation, both financially and physically. There's a lot of grieving work to do. So first things first is taking time to rest and nurture our body, taking time to be outside. And I'll leave, everyone has their own opinions about how far we should be going outside right now. But I'll say for me that as I found myself hiking, as I found myself in ancient redwood forests over the last few weeks, I have received more clarity and a sense of moving from a state of hypertension, worrying about the future, to a sense of actually everything is fine. We're here in this moment. So nature really holds the key in my experience. And I think that's part of our yoga practice, is we reconnect, we re-tap in with our original nature. So whether we're finding that nature on our mat by moving our animal body and connecting in with our primal breath, these are simple things, but we're, as complex, intelligent creatures, we often overlook the most simple things. That immunity comes from nature, that we need to feel the skin on our body. We need to breathe the fresh air that's outside of our house. And of course, we're doing so much more sitting and already we were doing so much sitting as a culture. This is part of what's being healed right now. We need more movement right now than we have needed ever before. And so finding those practices that really awaken us, finding the movement practices, the yoga or the fitness practices or the dancing practices. I know it's hard right now for all of us to find the motivation, and to find it's really the sacred discipline, the self-love, the self-care that draws us to the practice, even when we're feeling tired, even when we're feeling anxious. But this is exactly when we need those tools. The tools of the warrior of the heart, the tools of the yogi are that willingness to be embodied, to remember that when we're in our body, we have all of our resources available to us. When we're in the mind, there is so much chatter. And the power of the yoga is to come back down, to anchor into our earth body, to anchor into nature, which is our physical body, which is also nature, our original nature, which is love. Also to meet in community. And that's one of the huge blessings that we've found, one of the huge lights in this darkness, is that we've been gathering together in community. I've been teaching a class almost every day. I've been taking classes, dance classes, meditation classes. So many people keep talking about how they're on news overload. And I personally see that as part of the problem of really what we're trying to awaken to right now. And I have been instead overdosing on meditations. There's so many incredible offerings, including waking hours offerings, to really find leaders out there, to find people who are anchoring into their breath, who are anchoring into their practice, and for us to gather together in these virtual rooms and to feel, instead physically close, to feel close through our hearts. And in the power of gathering virtually, I think it's actually opening and expanding our minds significantly, in that we are, we're feeling more instead of thinking more, that there's emotion that comes, there's an energetic connection that comes that we can't, when we can't access that physical, we're feeling connected energetically and emotionally. So let's keep doing that.
I think that's so important to keep in mind, because I think we can often just read the news and then just be sad and boggle up and just want to sit in a blanket and sit on the couch, because it's so difficult. So finding that we just got to keep moving and to open up in other ways. I saw that you make all your online classes donation based, and you've encouraged unemployed, financially insecure people, health coworkers to take your classes free of charge. What inspired you to do this? Because that's so incredible to these people that schedules are all thrown off now.
Yeah, I would love to share about that. I have to make one comment about what you said right before that, because it also feels so important, is that when we also want to curl up in a blanket on the couch, we also have to do that. That's also just as important as our movement, right? Because there's so much grief right now, and we have to feel it to heal it. So thank you even for bringing that up, that we have to do our movement, and we have to curl up and cry and feel all the things, and then go back to the movement and go back to the connection. But of course, it seems so obvious and intuitive to me that all of us right now need to be offering all of our gifts to anyone and everyone who can receive it. I think a big part of what's being cleared out, or I feel and I know that a big part of what's being cleared out of the collective consciousness right now, what's being cleansed, is that idea that we just work for money. There is so much more alive in the human potential than just exchanging our life force for paper. And the power of human potential is that each of us has a light inside of us, which is an offering, which is unique to each of us. We're all part of the puzzle. We are all needed now. Every one of us has a unique and dynamic skill set that we've been cultivating and honing and practicing. And right now is the time to pull those tools out of the tool bag. So I'm blessed as a yoga teacher that I can offer to those who are unemployed. And I had just a crazy financial freak out from the beginning, at the beginning of this all happening. And then I just anchored in and I said, what's important? What's important is that I'm doing my service. I'm doing my work, and I trust as a result that I'll be taken care of. And what's incredible about these online classes, these donation-based online classes, is that those students, clients, and beings out in the world who are continuing to work, and I've confirmed this with many different yoga teachers who are offering, yoga and dance teachers who are offering online events, is that I'm actually making more money right now from my classes than I normally do, because there are people who can support, who are supporting far above and beyond what I'm even asking at my highest range. And then there are so many people showing up who are not in that position. So the power of this opportunity is it's really showing us that this is what's possible for all of us, that we can show up with our gifts in community, and as a result, we can be supported and we can support others. However that is, whatever we have to offer and whatever we need to receive, we can trust that we will receive what we need to receive, and that if we're brave enough to offer the fullness of our gifts. And that's a deep challenge. That's a deep transition right now, because it's been so beautiful to see people comment on the types of jobs that aren't necessarily, that have been cut. You know, what if we were contributing more directly to our food supply? What if we were contributing more directly to nurturing human minds and bodies versus just focusing on selling products? This might be a really healthy shift that we're seeing right now occurring, a really transformational moment for sure.
Thank you for that. I know people, it's amazing to see how many people are giving back right now. I know I have neighbors that are making masks and people that are picking up food for local elderly neighbors. So I think whatever we can do to help each other out is like what's building the human connection right now in such an isolating period.
Totally. Beautiful example. Exactly it.
Do you have any recommendations for, I know I have cousins that are healthcare workers and they have shifts back to back, and they don't really get to go outside and they don't get to have a lot of moments. Do you have any techniques that you would tell people that are working in the front lines right now, whether it's at the grocery store, in the hospital?
Yeah, thank you for that question. This is super important for those who are working on the front lines, for those who don't have access to the time that's required to really feel the grief of all that's happening. For me, the most imperative advice is to really anchor in to the resource that's always present, which is our breath. We're so blessed to have such an abundance of scientific research that has shown that when we take a moment to elongate and expand our exhale, to slow our exhale down, to move from hyperventilation, which a lot of us are doing all the time, into a more expanded full breath, that our levels of anxiety and even the hormones that are being released in our body calm and settle, and there's more clarity of mind and focus. And this is, right now, I'm reading a lot more than I have been, and I'm reading about my ancestors who are the indigenous people of Northern Europe, and reading about the original colonization, fighting against Rome, and even just reading about warriors in that moment of battle is, you know, if the mind gets crazy and the breath gets crazy, it's done, it's over. But the power of fighting, of being someone on the front lines who are really fighting for human potential right now, fighting for the survival of human potential, and fighting for continued connection to our own hearts, that are those who are being of service, even Amazon workers, as well as healthcare workers, that if we can just slow our breath down a little bit and it is the access point into this moment. It is the access point into clarity and ease. And that, it sounds so simple, and it doesn't fix all of our problems in one moment. But as a practice, if we can slow our breath down, this is the number one and potentially really the only thing that we need to step into the fullness right now. And thank you so much to those who are on the front lines. Thank you to the healthcare workers. Thank you to the Amazon workers, including those who went on strike and were fired by Amazon. Thank you for all of those who are continuing to show up to keep us healthy and safe.
Thank you so much. Lastly, I like to leave kind of like an open space. If there's anything I didn't ask, but you would like to tell people.
Thank you for creating that space for me to speak. Really just reiterate what I think is the most important thing here is that we have hit a collective dark night of the soul. And for those of us who have survived a heartbreak, for those of us who have sat with cancer, for those of us who have survived deep illness, for those of us who have gone through any challenge and come through it stronger, we know that we have the internal resources available inside of ourselves. That when we go through challenge, we come out, if we're willing to stay present with that challenge versus check out, numb out, and regress very quickly back to where we were before the challenge. We know that when we descend into the underworld and we come back up and out, we are stronger. We have a more of a bird's eye view, a big picture perspective. So I'm honoring all of us who are showing up to our practice, to our breath, to the practice of our life, of loving ourselves, of being present with our emotions, of being kind to ourselves, of being kind to our partners, our parents, our friends, of being kind to those whom we interact with, of asking ourselves in this moment, this is the gift of the dark night of the soul. We ask ourselves, how am I living? How do I want to spend the rest of my days? May we remember that this is the gift of this dark night of the soul. May we remember there's so many resources available to us by simply holding the tenderness of our own heart, holding that humanity, that the light of humanity shines through. And yeah, that's it.
That was so beautiful, and what a wonderful, wonderful reminder for everybody. I also just want to thank you for taking time with me in the waking hour. We're really excited to have you on here and to have everybody hear your story and your advice, and it's going to help so many people. I just know it.
Thank you so much, Victoria. Such a beautiful conversation. And thank you so much for everything you're doing at the waking hour. And may we continue to band together.
Visit us at wakinghour.com or find us on Instagram at Waking Hour Wellness.